Welcome everyone to the Let's Talk Women's Equality event. Thank you for joining us. It's great to have you. We're really excited to be having this conversation with our spectacular panel, as you can see. Firstly, I just want to thank US Tech Solutions for their assistance in putting together this event and this panel. It's going to be a great discussion around women's equality in the workplace. So just a few things before we get started on how today's session will go. I know that there's a feature on Riverside that says we'll take call-ins, but we won't be accepting any call-ins. We've got a lot to get through, but if you have any questions as we go through, make sure to input your questions in the chat feature so that we can address those at the very end. So today's agenda, we'll begin with talking about the barriers to women in work, what's preventing women from either entering or progressing and being successful in the workplace. Then we'll talk about what's holding organisations back, what challenges are organisations themselves facing. And then we'll be talking about how do we move the dial? What can organisations be doing? What can HR leaders be doing? What can business leaders be doing to help move women equality forward in the workplace? And as I said, at the end, we'll open up for a Q&A. So if you have any questions, then you can always input them into the chat and we'll get to those at the very end. But let me just give you a bit of scene setting as to what today's conversation is about. So today in the US is Women's Equality Day. So that's why we're here celebrating women's equality and talking about how we can move these initiatives forward to reflect on the remarkable strides that have already been made towards women's equality, and also to acknowledge that there are still persistent challenges that we have to overcome. And so, as I said, while significant progress has already been achieved, the workplace continues to be a battleground for women seeking equal opportunities, fair compensation, leadership roles, etc. The journey towards equality or gender parity is not just a moral imperative for businesses. It is a strategic business necessity. Research consistently demonstrates that diverse teams drive innovation, enhance problem solving, and improve financial performance of businesses. And so by embracing gender equality or women's equality in the workplace, it's not just about doing the right thing, it's about unlocking the full potential of your workforce and building a more sustainable and prosperous future for everybody. So that's why we're here today. So thanks for joining us, and I'll introduce our guest speakers. So you have myself, Erica Birtles. I am the CEO of the UWI, and I will be hosting the conversation and navigating us through this topic today. We have joining us Feliana Citradui. You can tell me if I've completely butchered that, Feliana.
Thank you, it's great.
And Feliana is the founder of Liver and co-founder of Women's Circle Club. So welcome, Feliana. We also have joining us Hira Ali, a leadership development and allyship specialist and author of 2 award-winning books, Her Way to the Top and Her Allies. Welcome, Hira. It's great to have you. And Kelly is joining us, Kelly Nyack from PepsiCo, and she is a senior coordinator of supplier diversity, which is a really interesting topic, and I hope we're going to touch on that as well today. So that's your panel. I think that's a really diverse kind of set of backgrounds and perspectives. So I think we're going to get some really great tidbits out of this conversation. So, guys, let's get right on into it. The first section is talking about barriers to women in work. So, Kelly, I'm going to come straight to you because when we had a chat previously, we were talking about, you know, your own personal experience of being in the workplace. I wondered if kind of drawing from that, you might kind of explain some of those challenges that women might face in the workplace.
Absolutely. I know my background has been predominantly 20 years of admin support type roles. And my current role as a senior coordinator, I don't really have the traditional admin type duties because I'm not classified as an admin. So I do a lot more actual coordinating. When I was in my previous roles, it was more common that you were the one in the meeting taking notes. You weren't asked much on opinion on things. And then, I've had positions where I was asked to make the coffee, and treating women like that, even if it is an admin role, you're you're missing out on an opportunity to hear some insights, because they're at a level different in the business than leaders and could have a different perspective that is more beneficial to hear than somebody who's used to always being in a specific role leading. So I think one of the keys is, being able to have a voice and having a leader that gives you a voice versus having a boss. Frequently, women are, basically gender normalized into, if you're in any kind of admin role, you're the one who's doing the decorating, you're the one who's ordering the food, you're the one who's doing all the female normalized assumed roles.
Yeah.
And you're not really looked at as having much input often. I think another thing is, being able to have the work-life balance, because a lot of, I have 3 kids, and there was times where I was not treated or discussed at very well just because I needed to be off for, my child for an appointment.
Mm-hmm.
And that shouldn't be the case either.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that, Kelly. I think that, at some point in some manner, there are many women who have experienced very similar things. And, the role of mother as well, of, balancing that with work is something that we hear all the time, the motherhood penalty, and those conversations are, they're really important conversations to have, because it's a reality. And it's unfortunately in a lot of cases unavoidable, because of that flexibility isn't afforded to women. So thank you for sharing that. And Feliana, I'm going to come to you next, because I wondered if you might share some other of those primary challenges that women face when entering and progressing within their chosen profession.
Sure. Well, thank you for your sharing also, Kelly, and thanks for this question. I think this is a super important question. For me, there is these 3 things actually very important for women, why these challenges persist. First of all, I always trying to look inside, internally. Is there any problem? Is there anything I can do? It's true that some of women, we still have somehow, I don't know why, imposter syndrome, right? Whereas less for men in the same capacity. So this is the first challenge I think we need to try to solve from ourselves, right? This is something that we can do at least from ourselves. Second, I think very important also, how to network. How to network in the professional area, how to network in the business area, but the same way how actually men, even though with our style, female, or even with the style of men, up to you, how we can network and talking about business, talking about professional life, because this is really helpful for our career, for our business, etc. And I think in this sector, still, men somehow dominate, the network in the higher level. But this is really can be our strength, because I think as a woman somehow it's quite easier, maybe, in the room of a meeting, networking event and stuff, to talk finally with men and women, etc. We have more this flexibility, so this need to be our strength. For me, this is very important, because I think, as you know, I also like promoting this woman circle club, which is actually a networking event, because this is what I see the difference, mostly in business, but I believe also in corporate, how women is not actually equal right now in the business area or in the corporate area, because they lack of sources. The sources you can get from the network. Today I don't have money, but we can open the network and try to get the sources. And the third, I really agree with Kelly, actually is the problem that women voices is not heard enough. This is we cannot emphasize more, whether in the media, whether in the company, or in whatever level. You can see that it's always dominated mostly by male. Now there is certain advances, which is great, but sometimes it just stuck in the number, which is, for example, we need to have a panel 50-50. That's great. But if you see the time of speaking, sometimes it's mostly men that's dominate actually. So we still being a, I'm sorry, but like a green plant there, we are there for the quota, but we're still not being heard enough. And this
Hmm.
is very problematic. This is the point that is the most problematic, like Kelly highlighted. Why? Because this contribute to persist the mindset of patriarchal mindset. All the voices mostly that we heard is from men. So the
Hmm.
point of view of this world mostly we see from men's glasses. How we can create equality if still the opinion that dominate the society is actually from men. So I think these three main point that for me can help to face these challenges.
Yeah, and thank you, Feliana. And it's really interesting the points you make about, the networking and, the opportunity for women to network and skilling for networking as well, because I guess that's also kind of a bit of a holdback. But Hira, from kind of an intersectional approach to this, if we start to look at not just women, but also women of colour, what kind of challenges do women and women of colour face in these leadership roles specifically?
Thank you for sharing and asking a question, Erica. I think Feliana and Kelly have highlighted some great points. But I would say when I wrote my first book, Her Way to the Top, I interviewed 300 women and I asked them, what are the top challenges holding you back in your career? And there were a combination of internal and external barriers. So to Feliana's point, we already have, unfortunately, owing to the external systemic bias that we have experienced and, all that we have all the minimization which has been normalized. Women are not listened to, their voices are trivialized. Because of that, we have developed a set of internal barriers like imposter syndrome and perfectionism and a culturative set. Now, women in leadership positions, according to my research, they obviously face an amplified distinctive set of challenges as they climb the ladders. First of all, it's isolation, because the more you climb the top, the more isolating it is, because people judge you. They judge you a lot. There's a culturative stress because you try and adapt to the values and orientation of the dominant culture, majority culture, and definitely women are in minority in most positions at the top because it's a man's world that we live in. Then women and people of color obviously experience bias. Now, there are lots of different biases we can speak about, but there is a prove it again bias, meaning that they experience constant scrutiny and the need to prove themselves, that they are competent. And then many women, especially women of color, they have shared how they are expected to perform above and beyond the norm. There's also tightrope bias for women to master this balancing act between being seen as, not too masculine, but also to be seen as likable and feminine, but at the same time assertive. Because we all know when we try to be assertive, we are called aggressive, and the parameters by which we are judged, or the yardstick which is used to judge us, is very different than it is for men. And then I think for women of color, there's also a lot of biases, like, there's a stereotype threat. So, for example, as an Asian, brown, Muslim immigrant woman, if I don't do well, then people are not going to say that, oh, Hira didn't do well because Hira is incompetent. People are going to say, oh, Hira didn't do well because all women are like that, all Asians are like that, all Muslims are like that, all immigrants are like that. So I am carrying a lot of burden, right? Because I am representing a number of identity groups. And that's a lot of pressure, I would say. And then for women of color, obviously, there is a lot of, bias, such as the angry Black woman trope, or, the oppressive need of rescuing labels imposed on Muslim women, or the docility, or, the model minority myths for Asian women. So on top of the fact that women leaders already, the general perception of their competence is held to higher standards in evaluations, and they themselves do a very intense internal scrutiny. But for women of color, there are all these biases to contend to with as well. So I would say it is quite tough. It's a combination of internal and external barriers that is holding us back as we climb the ladder.
Thank you for sharing, Hira. And it's as you say, that additional expectation to prove, your value and, how hard you work beyond that of what other people are expected to do. Then, that's more burden on any person, and extremely unfair. So thank you guys for that. Just for our guests, just a quick reminder, if you have questions, we're not taking call-ins, but do input them into the live stream chat and we'll get to those at the end. So just make sure that you're popping them in there and we'll get those sorted at the end. So we're moving on to section 2 now. So we've identified some of those barriers for women, but we really in this section are talking about what's holding organizations back from, making that first move or initiative forward. So Hira, coming straight back to you then. So what do you think are some of the most common reasons or justifications that organizations use to avoid implementing these women equality initiatives?
Gosh, there's so many excuses. I'm just going to list a few top ones that come to my mind. So one of the common justification is failing to acknowledge that the problem exists, right? Because many organizations, they claim to care about all women, but then in that, they often lack a nuanced understanding of how women with intersectional identities often face amplified marginalization. Another argument is the belief in the so-called meritocracy. Organizations claim that we provide equal opportunities to everyone, yet they overlook the fact that many women, especially those from underrepresented, marginalized backgrounds, they start far behind the starting line as it is. And this ignores the structural barriers that prevent women from gaining the same access as men have, in terms of qualifications and experience. And that perpetuates the cycle of inequality, which we are trying to avoid in the first place. Sometimes another thing which organizations say is that we haven't found enough qualified and competent women, the pipeline problem. And the harsh reality is, are you looking enough? Are you working hard to expand, the way you're recruiting women? Are you only looking at particular people? Because I think, even on so many panels, we see there are manels actually, because people say, well, I didn't find enough qualified women, but have you looked enough? Some organizations are concerned or focused on gender equality because they feel that was going to disrupt the current workplace dynamics. They might be getting resentment or backlash from male employees. So therefore, they are a little hesitant about that. And then also, finally, there's this misguided belief that women are not ambitious enough, or that once they have children, they will lose interest and they'll leave. And in my books, both my books, in fact, I have quoted an example of an ally who, when they had an open position and there was a qualified pregnant employee, he asked her if she wanted the role instead of assuming that she wouldn't. So a lot of time, we've done surveys in different organizations where people say, ask them, why are women not progressing? And the fact is, for example, women who are returning to work, for example, or women who take career breaks, when they return, the kind of bias they experience, that in it takes a toll on their self-esteem and confidence, as a result of which they feel very indebted. They feel, oh, you know what, at least I'm getting to work, as a result of which that impacts their ambition. So honestly, a number of excuses which the organizations need to look into and self-evaluate.
Absolutely. It just sounds like a lot of misconception and a lot of, misunderstanding of the problem. Sorry, Kelly, were you going to say something?
It's okay. No, I was going to add, it also depends, a huge factor on the culture of the company. Since I've been at PepsiCo, it's not just in my role as senior coordinator or my leader. A lot of the leaders that are men do ask for the opinions. And I know, you can go to PepsiCo's website and they have a huge gender pay, managerial and pay equity initiative that they have been targeting for a while now. And I believe it's and I'd have to look, you'd have to look at the site and see exact, but I want to say it was 50% of the managerials be women and the pay be within 1% of male equal parts in the role. So it also depends on the initiatives the companies are taking to make it equity.
True.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you say, it's how does that culture operate? What are the priorities of the culture? And oftentimes, things like diversity are seen as, or inclusion initiatives are seen as second to things like, profit, and when actually, they sales and marketing and those. Sorry, someone's calling in. Just a reminder, guys, if you want to ask any questions, make sure that you're popping it into the live stream chat. All right. Sorry, so we're going to move on to Feliana now. So thank you, Kelly, for that one. Feliana, why do you think employers are struggling to move the dial on these initiatives? Is there something that you've noticed?
Well, I would say simply because they don't follow the rules, because they don't comply with the law. There is already the law, European law 2022, that oblige company actually to have more than 40% for the equality. It's not yet 50-50, but 40%, for example, in the board position. But the fact right now, we still have less than 1/3 in the biggest European company that has a female in their board, and only 1 out of 10 in the general board, which is why we are here, right? To make these things happening, actually. So my question is there really a will from the company to let female lead? This is the things, I think. If you really have a will, there is already the rule for that. You even need to comply. You have even an incentive to comply, right? Another directive in 2023 actually encouraged companies to do extra financial reporting of their ESG, and gender equality can be part of it, right? So I think the question remain is this. Once female has already back to the first question, passed through their imposter syndrome, how to network and already get hurt, etc. Does company really apply finally their will to let female lead in the higher level? Because I don't think that there's no female competence for the higher position. There is, but the question is, are they ready to make them the leader? So I think this is really why the real problematic is. Yeah, about the will. That's it.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Feliana. And I think it kind of, stems from what Hira was saying about the misconceptions of, of women's equality in the workplace and, why you need it and in, those things. But Kelly, I want to talk about supplier diversity for a sec. Before we do, though, because some people might be wondering, what the hell is supplier diversity? Can we just frame what supplier diversity is within a business first?
Explaining it in the simplest terms, it's basically a DEI version for the supply chain and procurement, helping getting the diverse owned businesses into your supply chain.
Great stuff. Thank you. I wanted to define that first before we get into the question, which is in this space of supply diversity, what do you think is holding organizations back in building, either strong relationships with women-owned businesses or whether it's, building diversity in their supply chain? What do you think is holding people back?
I think when it comes to supplier diversity, there's a lot of things that can impact that internally. One, how much awareness does your company have that supplier diversity exists? Or, how far of a reach does the supplier diversity team actually have in the company? The other is how much collaboration. It kind of goes back to awareness, but I think the more that you focus on the collaboration with the procurement, with the supply chain, with even the other groups, because there's other areas of procurement and supply chain that may not be specifically under those two categories, but still has diverse supplier needs. It could be in marketing, it could be, through HR, different topics, swag, promo. So the more you're getting awareness out and collaborating with your teams internally, the better chance you're going to have to be able to grow your supplier diversity. I think the other thing also that can impact that is how the supplier diversity team is set up. Because I know different companies do set up different ways. We've been to conferences where, there's teams that actually have a supplier diversity person per procurement area for say corrugated boxes, for if they have certain ingredients. They may have a special person on each of those teams versus an actual supplier diversity team that helps source for all of it and then introduces them internally to those teams. So it also could depend on how the team is set up.
Yeah. It's really interesting. It's such an interesting space because you are talking about human capital as well as you are, other types of suppliers. So it's a really interesting space. And I'm interested to ask you in a moment just about, how organizations can, move these things forward. But it seems that actually there's a complexity to supplier diversity that really comes down to how an organization sets it up, and maybe that comes down to culture and comes down to awareness, as you say. So guys, thank you for that. There's some great things coming out of this conversation. Once again, guests, if you have any questions, then please do put them into the chat and we'll address those at the end. But for now, we're going to move into section 3, which is actually looking at the things organizations can be doing to move their women equality initiatives forward. So Feliana, I'm actually going to start with you on this question, if it's all right. So we're talking about kind of women's equality and how organizations can drive that forward. A lot of roles, a lot of HR particularly, will move straight towards support networks and employee resource groups as like the first place to kind of get these things moving. So with your experience of kind of female networks and groups, what's your advice to organizations on how to successfully build a support network for women in their business?
Sure. Yes, thank you. I think that support network is a very good solution. Why? Because female can identify that they are not alone. Other people like me right now talking with you, with Hira, with Kelly, we know that we both facing the same problem, right? We both agree with what is the problem and how to advance together. So this is first is the key. And how to make it successful. First, for me, it's to include male. It's not to exclude also male because they are our ally. For me, inclusivity is not to exclude the other gender, right? So include male. Why? Because like a country, for example, if you want to be reconsidered, you have the territory, you have governments, you have population, you need to be reconsidered by other country. The same. If we just pronounce ourselves like, okay, we are equal, we are this and that, but if the other partner will not recognize us as equal, then it will be nonsense. So we need also them to be our allies, saying that yes, right now we will want to move toward gender diversity, create a mixed event so that it also raise awareness not only to women but to men, that I believe they also have a goodwill to make this cause actually advancing, right? Second, very important, I think, to always have a top panel, as women need also to identify with some inspiring role model. Of course, that's why in all of my event I only invite like a top speaker, a Forbes 30 under 30, Legion of Honors, a multi-million dollars company, a female leader, etc., so that it can also be such a role model for them and inspire them. Also male panel, so that we can see their view, how their work, etc., cooperate together. Then the third thing that is like less important but still also a great place. We only establish things that is, for example, in the mayor office, the party a room of the mayor office, etc. It's just very beautiful in Paris. Well, it's also inspire you to connect, to mingle with people when you are in the good area. So I think this three point is very important. So the key is really quality and inclusivity.
Great stuff, Eliana. Like what you're saying there about the allyship is as you say, super important. And I think we often, when we think about building an ERG group, for example, you think, oh, I'm going to get all the women in my organization in this. And it's like, well, actually, maybe you expand beyond that and, you address not just women, but also men in the organization. So thank you for that. And Kelly, I want to go back to the supplier diversity conversation again, because I think if we phrase it this way, how can supplier diversity teams help to drive women equality initiatives in an organization? Because we've kind of spoken about the role, but how does it do that? What are the benefits of doing that as well?
Like, I would say one of the things is there's certifying organizations for diverse owned businesses. So our team, we actually travel. The one here in the US, it's WeBank, Women's Business Enterprise National Council. And then internationally, I believe it's We Connect International. Go to the conferences. You're going to meet potential suppliers. You have chances for receptions and networking and expo to get time where everybody can come by. And like I said, there's receptions, so you'll have a little bit more one-on-ones available. A lot of times they also do a matchmaking where you can pick, and it's like a 15-minute schedule, and you're running through and getting to talk with them, see the capabilities, and discuss further how you can work with them. The other thing is, like, even internally, use your ERGs, your women's ERG, connect them with a female supplier for promo items, for catering, for whatever you may need for the ERG events. Use those diverse owned suppliers from that group for that.
It just sounds like, Kelly, with supplier diversity, there's real partnership required here between the supplier diversity function and then, you know, other parts of the business, you know, not just marketing or, you know, HR, but also into those employee resource groups. It feels like that's the whole, you know, that's how you drive it is through partnership.
Yeah, like in the summer during Pride Month, I connected our Equal ERG to a trans-owned promo swag supplier for some items that we needed to get. And it's just some of the ways that we can help increase. Now, yeah, the needle is small because swag is not a very high spend, but it's still a connection. It's still getting that supplier business in your company.
I love it. I love stories like that because it's really, you know, sometimes those suppliers aren't huge, big, you know, businesses, but sometimes they are the smaller business that's just doing a good thing, or that, you know, they're in a position to, you know, relate to that program. So yeah, no, thanks, Kelly, for that. And Hira, what do you think are the most effective strategies for organizations to achieve gender parity or women's equality in leadership positions? Because I guess we've spoken quite broadly about women in general and supply diversity, but if we're talking about leadership, what might your suggestions be?
So I would say, to Filiana's point, if there is willingness there, and if you really are willing to have top leaders, then have a good look around and check if your culture is unconsciously encouraging bias. Honestly, from recruitment to talent management, appraisal to compensation, management needs to revisit all organization policies and systems to check for implicit and explicit bias. And, you know, a revamp, if you have the resources and again the willingness, should be deployed, and you know, which means allocating the existing, you know, probably reallocating existing resources, hiring necessary staff, you know, in making sure that you are aligned with equality regulations. Of course, ERGs, we already talked about, is an important way to invest in women ERGs so they're able to went out and understand what those problems are and then be part, you know, talked about male allyship. So, you know, I've written a book on male allyships. I'm a huge advocate of men being part of the dialogue. But, and also when you're looking at women, then look at all women, right? So women of color, Black women, brown women, Muslim women, Jewish women, trans women, lesbian women, women with disabilities. So sometimes the lens is very narrow. You know, when you're talking about women, do not be afraid to talk about all women. And that literally means looking from an intersectional lens and making sure that not women are not, you know, none of the marginalized groups, especially women from intersectional identities, are ignored. But something very basic is improve parental leave benefits. You know, managing home responsibilities has traditionally been a woman's job, and it's expected that women are going to flex their careers and their commitments because that's what society dictates. But introducing things such as non-transferable paternity leaves can have such a huge impact. In Europe, they did this successfully. And that has such a huge impact, not only on improving gender equality, but also improving father-child relationships. And then also offering flexible timings, right? Because a lot of women, working moms, post-COVID, we all know this, that we can work from home. So unnecessarily pulling back women into organizations just because you want to see women there, I think that is something which organizations really need to revisit. You offer workplace flexibility, reduced working hours, job sharing, work from home, compressed work week. So many things which can, giving the dramatic, fast-paced global challenges, we need to make sure that we are offering, and not just working moms, not working dads, working parents. And again, it's not just parents with children who need flexibility, people with a disability for health reason, for whatever reason, you might need a flexibility. So offering workplace flexibility could be a real game changer. But then, of course, also giving unbiased appraisals, because women often get shortchanged in reviews and miss out on critical talent assessment discussions. So making sure that that's fair enough. Support impartial hiring practices, the recruitment itself, the language, everything should be gender neutral, right? And then, of course, be transparent about the pay gap, transparency to promotion. I know Filiana mentioned about how PepsiCo has this whole website about pay gaps. So looking at the pay gaps, where is it that you can interview? So honestly, there's a lot we can do, but then it begins with, as Filiana says, Kelly mentioned about the pay gap, where how PepsiCo had all the pay gaps and everything on the website. So I think that's a good way. A lot of male allies, when their female colleagues are being interviewed, they actually share the salaries and they say, this is what I'm getting offered. So, just so that you're not shortchanged, I'm sharing this with you. And that has made such a huge difference because women, when they tend to negotiate pay salaries, they will often ask less than they're worth. Small things like that can make a huge difference.
Absolutely. And it's interesting, the approach of, the different approaches of men and women as well. I know that in conversations with my husband, he's never afraid to ask for what he wants. Whereas I'm much more reserved. I'm much more like, or if I feel like I can, if I feel like I'm qualified, or if I feel like I'm, in a good position to do so, then yes, I will. But there is always that, not always, but if we generalize this, there are differences in terms of like that, general approach to work life. So yeah, as you say, there's a lot there, Hira. And I guess my only question is if an organization is super stuck, like, because I think the women's equality, gender parity kind of conversation has been around for a while. Whereas things like neurodiversity is relatively new in by comparison. The organizations probably have some sort of program or initiative that they're running. If they're feeling really stuck, where do anyone can answer that question, I guess. Feliana, did you want to give that one a go, or?
So, yeah, sure. Well, I think that we already stated like several aspects that is very important. The will, and like as here I say also, the diversity, the real diversity of cultural background, etc. is also very important. And as we know, it actually will help the company. I think you know very well, Erica, with the neurobiology, etc. Actually, company that inclusive, including women, including diversity, multicultural, etc., has 60% more chance to succeed in all the key sector. So it's also in their own interest. Start by thinking of your profit. Then that's it. You want to be successful, you want to earn more money, include more women, include more diversity. That's it.
So Hira, I want to ask you the same question. If someone's really stuck, where do they look? Do they go back to anything in particular, or do they have to rethink something? What do you think?
So I am a huge fan of surveys, Erica, because I feel like if you don't know where to start, then ask the people you're trying to help. Because a lot of times we make assumptions, right? This is what they need. But go and survey them, find out what is it that they want from the organization. And sometimes just start with the basics, honestly. If you start with the basics, you can go a long way. For example, events, right? Structure diverse events. I mean, networking, we talked about. A lot of women do not like to network after work, and not just because a lot of women do not like to drink and socialize over golf games or pubs. So are your events inclusive? So start with the basics and try and see where you can get the basics right, and then move on to, after you find out, and then hire consultants, hire me. Just kidding. So, honestly, just have a look around. I think benchmarking is such a good way. Look at what other organizations that are well respected, are admired in this industry. What are they doing? So, have a conversation with them and see what they can do to help you.
Yeah, and your point as well, that there are people out there to help. That's the reason that the UWI exists, is to connect the organizations who are having these challenges with the professionals, the practitioners, the companies who can help them to solve that issue.
Yeah, and Kelly, sorry,
the help is out there.
Sorry, just what Kelly mentioned, go to different diverse conferences, because if you don't expand, your network and interact with people who are different from you, then you'll always be getting the same people and the same solutions. So, expand that and interact with people who are diverse, so that you're able to get a varied response, which sort of enlightens you from an intercultural lens as well.
Absolutely. And Kelly, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I was gonna say, for me, like, with having 3 kids, my schooling got put on hold. My my youngest came while I was going for school, and now he'll be 20 actually tomorrow, and
Wow.
PepsiCo has a school program that I was approved for, and so now I'm able to also go back and finally finish my bachelor's. So it's also like resources that the companies have available for their employees to be able to grow as well.
Yeah, I was having a fascinating conversation with somebody last week, and what she was saying was, and she's in the procurement space as well, Kelly, and what she was saying was that actually it's about integration. It's about allowing people, and I'm doing a podcast with her, so everybody, keep an eye out for that one, but it's about allowing people to integrate work into their life and to help integrate them into your workplace. It's not about balancing, but actually about how you integrate that as part of like your, the individual's daily, ecosystem and daily life, as, a piece of what they deal with on a daily basis, and making that as seamless and as frictionless as possible. And so those initiatives, Kelly, as schooling or of upskilling opportunities, of networking opportunities, of resources to help women plan financially, because financial independence is also a big topic, that those kinds of initiatives are also ways of helping women with their lives, just as much as it is about helping them be better employees for you. So panelists, thank you so much for the discussion today. We've still got some time, so I've got some questions that we can talk through at the end, but guests, if you do have any questions for our panelists, make sure that you input those into the chat. We will be able to address those in just a second. But before we do, I just want to thank you all for joining us, panelists, guests, and also for our hosts or sponsors, US Tech Solutions, for their participation in bringing this discussion together, and bringing women's equality to the forefront of everyone's mind. It's definitely a very important topic and still ongoing. For anyone listening, if you want more information on the UWI, then make sure to visit our website. There are more events like this on their way. We also have the UWI magazine, which will be coming out in September, and there will be more issues to follow, so make sure that you subscribe to that. But thank you again for joining us. Make sure that you post any questions in the chat. But Hira, I actually wanted to come back to you for a second on the allyship discussion, because I guess if there are men listening to this discussion, they're leaders in an organization, how do they best be allies to women in their organization? We've not really touched on that yet.
Right. So I follow a very simple model, Erica. In psych, you begin by challenging yourself. So recognize your own privilege, acknowledge your biases, and question yourself and see, in my everyday behavior, in my everyday actions, what is it that I'm doing that is perpetuating bias? So challenge yourself. But the biggest thing I would say, which is most difficult as well, is challenging others, because when men publicly call out sexism, that makes such a huge difference. And not just sexism, any kinds of isms and phobias. research has proved that when men suggest in public forum that any sort of hate comment or sexism or racism has occurred, perpetuators, they feel more confident, but also, sadly, men listen to them more as compared to the women or the victims themselves. So that can make a huge difference. And I am also a huge advocate of sponsorship. So if men cannot just be mentors, I think mentoring is great, but if you can sponsor women, within your organization, I think that is great, because instead of feeling ashamed of your privilege, leverage it to advocate for deserving colleagues who may not be receiving the recognition they deserve. So, for example, providing them insider cultural knowledge, helping them gain perspectives, facilitating connections, introducing them to, important people, and then, just pushing them for significant roles in career advancement. A lot of times, as we all know, women are shy of self-advocating. I don't call it self-promotion. I call it self-advocacy, because that's what we all need to do. And men can play a huge role in supporting women to self-advocate for themselves, to speak up for themselves. And, if they're being small things, for example, if they're being talked to in the meeting, or the ideas are being taken, or they're being interrupted, so call that out publicly.
Mm.
So these are the little things which can make a huge difference. And then, of course, a lot of people think that to be allies, you need to be influencers or somebody in the HR department, somebody in the EDI department. You don't need to be. Whatever your level, whatever your position, as a man, because of your gender, you have that privilege, right? So, just sort of use that privilege, whatever that level is, and, call yourself out, then call others before moving on to calling out organization culture in terms of policies that might be biased or, leaning against women.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, there's also acknowledging that that's probably not always an easy journey, but by doing that's it's very valuable, as you say, because, there are, even in my husband's work environment, it's a very toxic masculine environment. It's a factory where, setting, not very many women on the shop floor, and there's been some things that he said to me that has been said on the shop floor, and I've been like, why didn't you call them out?
Mm-hmm.
But there is that pressure of being in a all male blue collar workforce that,
and it's the bro code, right, which you don't want to violate. And that's exactly what you need to be able to do. And that's the reason why I always say men need allies too. It's not, if they can't do it alone. So if there are a group of them doing it, then they will actually feel better about calling it out rather than being the only person doing so. So, get together a band of allies who can support you.
Great stuff. And Feliana, I just wondered if maybe we could talk about ESG, because in the UK and in Europe, ESG is a very important aspect of businesses' corporate social responsibility. It's like the new, evolution of corporate social responsibility, and something that we'll probably see more often than not come into the US as well. So how do you think it fits into that?
Well, yes, I think that this has become very important because actually Europe started a new directive early last year, January, about every company need to do extra financial reporting about their ESG, right? And it's clearly in the social and good governance side, it's including also, of course, gender equality. On top of it, we have another directive in 2022 that obliged every company to comply by 30th of June 2026 to have 40% of female in non-executive board and 33% in the board member. So all of this is already encouraged, and it is in the global view of ESG that will be the more and more important. Why? Because this is our future. This is our only planet, and where we want to go toward the future. And this is now big in Europe. It will be getting bigger and bigger. It will not getting less. So every company has the interest to comply right now, and also it will export it in the US because, as you know, US innovate and then Europe regulates. So we will bring our regulation there soon, and everybody will need to comply finally.
Yeah, and I think it's the emphasis on a company doing what they say they're doing and not
Exactly.
just saying that they do it.
Exactly.
And so it's a great initiative and move forward, but it's still used synonymously with CSR. I don't think people 100% know that actually this is the same, but this is including measurement now, so you're actually going to have to say what your goals are and how you're going to achieve it, and then have you actually managed it.
Exactly.
But yeah, thank you for that, Feliana. It's really important that we include ESG in the conversation as well, because that's such a huge governance and compliance piece. And Kelly, in terms of supplier diversity, is there anything that we need to talk about in terms of how supplier diversity helps to address the challenges of women-owned businesses? It's kind of working the other way round, of how supplier diversity teams can support other women businesses as well. But is there anything that we've not touched on already around it that we should be highlighting?
I think when it comes to women-owned businesses, I mean, the best way to support is, go to the conferences. The ones I'm aware of is WeBank and, We Connect International. There's also, I know in the US, there's regional chapters of WeBank as well. But that's where you're going to have a chance to meet a lot of the women-owned. And actually in supplier diversity, a lot of times there is intersectionality in certifications. So like there's one company I know, they are disabled, they are women-owned and LGBT-owned. So you can find a lot of intersectionality in the conferences when you go and meet the suppliers there as well. And then just awareness. It's just awareness, internal awareness. What is supplier diversity? How, have meetings internally, bring the awareness, bring the collaboration.
Yeah, and that collaboration and partnership piece is super important. I guess as well, it's not, as you said, like there is this intersectional kind of occurrence that happens. So it's not just like WeBank, but in the US there's also NMSDC and organizations like that focus on minority businesses. So there's really a lot out there that people can tap into, not only as organizations looking for diverse suppliers, but also for women-owned businesses who are looking for more opportunities to work with organizations like PepsiCo. Great stuff. So Hira, I wanted to come back to you quickly, if that's all right. I'm kind of just filling time, but I think these are actually really important questions. What advice do you have for women who are perhaps feeling like, who are experiencing burnout or feeling a bit stuck in that they're not progressing any further than where they're at? What would your advice be to them?
So I would say, Erica, it's very important to have a strong support system. And I advocate for what's called a personal board of directors, in which you have coaches and allies, sponsors and mentors. Make sure you have those in your corner, because if you don't have adequate support, then you will not have the necessary guidance. And then all that you need to get to the top. You require they say you require a village to raise a kid. Honestly, to get a woman to the top, you also require a whole board of directors who are pushing for. And then I would say, honestly, take breaks, because so many women, senior women, I coach. Yesterday only I had a coaching call with the senior women who had experienced burnout because they don't take breaks. There's so many women, because they're so eager to prove themselves and because they have been traditionally minimized, trivialized, not listened to, they want to make sure that they're always perfect, they're putting the best foot forward, and that is exhausting, right? So try and delegate and try and take breaks, consciously hit the pause button, because you owe that to yourself. You don't always be on a hamster wheel, because that's what we do with children, and so much going on in our lives. We're literally just moving after the next goal. So many women don't even stop to celebrate their achievements, because they're then just moving on to the next big thing. So I would say prioritize your mental and physical health, because nobody else is going to do it for you. And then also make sure that you have these postal board of directors, allies and sponsors and coaches who are going to make sure that if you are lost, or if you feel tired or exhausted, then this board of directors, they are going to channel you back on the path that you're supposed to go on.
Great stuff. Thank you for that. And the delegation piece as a female leader is so important.
Yeah, because just because you're good at everything doesn't mean you need to do everything yourself. And we are good at a lot of things, but you need to be able to let go and avoid gatekeeping so that, you can rest and recuperate yourself.
Absolutely. And Feliana, how can we measure the impact of things like women's networks on women's career progressions? What do you think?
Well, as an entrepreneur, I think I agree completely with Hira. You need to ask feedback from your user, from the person that is concerned, which is female. So, for example, the first time I organized a woman circle club is to celebrate International Women's Day. But after that, everybody come to us and saying that, look, actually, it's great. We have a place where we can network. It's inclusive, etc. To please again, creating this, and we ask also some feedback, like what is your impact, what you need, what is you're struggling with, etc. So this is very important, with also inclusive environment, that they feel that, oh, there's not only me, there's not only women, there's also our female ally. My co-founder is actually a man. So all of this inclusive environment, the number and the feedback, this is the most important thing, I think, to measure if it is impactful or not.
Yeah, and I think, even just starting with those questions and, getting that baseline of where you're currently at, and then, being able to continue that conversation, have that two-way dialogue is yes, really, really important and really valuable. And Kelly, I wondered if we could just kind of finish with you in terms of, from either your own experience or from working in supplier diversity, is there any lasting advice that you would give to organizations about supporting women in their business from any level?
I would say, the biggest thing is my experience in my current role, and with my current leader. Always be open to hear what she may have to say.
Mm-hmm.
You may help her find a talent. That was also something that had happened in my current role. I think on our call I had went into that, but yeah. Because of my leader actually listening and giving me a chance, not necessarily to prove myself, but a chance to explore something that I felt I could do. I ended up getting into Adobe, and then that catapulted me into, let's look in the school thing and getting approved in that. And, now I'm going back to finish my degree in marketing, and all because I had just simply, him and I were frustrated on a project we were working on. And I was like, can I get Adobe? I'm sure I can do it. I just haven't used it yet, but I'm sure I can learn it and do it. Mm-hmm. And he was like, okay. And our result was better than the sources we were using at the moment. And it continued to be. I've not had previous places of employment open for that. Actually, I had one that 3 mistakes in 6 months and I was let go.
Wow.
So the pressure to be perfect and not let anything get messed up. Yes. Especially when, women are more in an admin role. People often forget who you're supporting, that you're still human. You can still make a mistake.
And I think that's what it comes down to, is treating this on an individual case-by-case basis. We can't approach any of these topics really with just a women's lens or just a neurodiversity lens or just there has to be an individual case-by-case conversation of what do you need, how can I support you, where do you feel like you'll succeed, and having that open dialogue and being able to identify an individual's strengths and playing to those strengths is definitely a conversation worth having. So guys, thank you panelists for joining us today. It's been great to chat to each of you. There's been some really interesting little tidbits and pieces of advice that we've given organizations. This event will be posted to our YouTube, so the UWI YouTube channel. And for anyone who has missed it, we will be sending them the recording via email. So no one's missing out. We'll be sure to share the key takeaways from today's discussion. But panelists, once again, thank you so much. If you just stay on just for a second, and attendees, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.